Are you ready? Let's go!
Don't you sometimes just want to talk about everything? You know, there's days when you can just talk about anything. Need to sit back and chat about nothing at all? Nothing But Julie, coming at you with fun and creative topics and interviews.
Did you hear Julie's podcast? She's got the greatest topics.
Come join the chat about everything, anything, and nothing. So unwind and tune in to Nothing But Julie. Great topics and cool interviews with some pretty awesome people. And now, without further delay, here's Nothing But Julie.
Hi, everybody. It's Julie and Rhonda, Nothing But Julie podcast. Hey, Rhonda, what's cooking?
Hi, Julie. How are you?
Great. So, hey, guys, we have got a nice little treat for you today. We strive to have some really cool topics, and I think this is a really good one. And this one, we're going to be talking about what our education background is, and if we currently use it in our job or in the jobs that we've had. And I think, Rhonda, that this is a fun topic because there's got to be a lot of people who at a young age, they decide to go to college or get certified in a trade or whatever it is. And they're not 100% sure that, that's something they want to continue doing. And then throughout their lives, they're constantly changing what they originally were going to do, such as yourself. You have 4 degrees. And
right.
I was saying earlier that, Rhonda has more degrees than I do, and that I can talk about, where I've been and what I've done, but her life is so much more interesting than mine. So I'm just going to very quickly tell you about my end. And then probably the rest of the podcast will be about Rhonda because it's really cool, her journey. But for me, I just did not want to go to college. I did not ever get that feeling to want to go to college. I never cared about going away or staying local or joining a sorority. And I just didn't feel it. And I remember when I was younger, I had told my parents this, and my mom had said, well, if you don't go to college right after high school, then we're not paying for your education. And I know. And I really feel like had I had that gap year given to me, I would have been much more prepared and ready. I just spent 13 years in school. I just wanted to travel. I wanted to do stuff. And I was working since I was 16. So I had saved some money and I was ready to travel. However, all of my friends and almost everyone I knew had gone to college. It was the thing to do. And I do know some people who traveled, but they were kind of going to places I really wasn't interested in. So I started working as soon as I left college. I was in retail, and I wanted to start from the ground up and work in a corporation. All I ever thought about was business. And I actually did start going to a community college and only took a few courses just to start, getting my feet wet. And then I went for about a year and a half, and I got a bunch of courses under my belt. And then I went to Catherine Gibbs, which was and still is a business school, mostly for women. And it's more of like a secretarial school, which was also business. So I got my 2-year degree through there. And when I was 21 years old, I got my first job in a small office where I was making $21,000, which was at the time huge for me. And then I would say about 2 years later, I decided that I was going to go back to school and finish my degree. And at that time, you were able to use like lifetime credits and like any kind of work credits or all that stuff. And I actually gained an extra year. So all I needed to do was go to college for 1 more year to get my bachelor's. I'm like, okay, cool. I actually changed jobs, and I was working at this other company that was a big corporation, and they paid for my education as long.
Oh, that's so nice.
Yeah. A lot of businesses I know still do that, but it has to have to do
Oh, yeah, something that you can
that you can
use
use.
in your position there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it was really just business. So I went back and I went for one more year. And it was hard because I was working about 40 minutes from where I lived, but the campus was literally a hop, skip, and a jump from there. So I took night classes. So I was up at 6. I had to schlep all the way out to work. I worked there, my 8 hours, and then I had to then, go to college right after that, and then come home. By the time I got home, I mean, I was exhausted, and then it was a repeat. But I really wanted to finish my degree in a short amount of time. So I had met my husband while I was going to college. My parents put the house up for sale, but they weren't going to sell it. My dad just wanted to find out how much he could get. Well, when he found out how much he could get and they were snowbirds, they decided they were legitimately going to sell the house. The house sold within a very short period of time. And I had just finished my semester, and all I had left was summer semester and 2 more classes to complete my degree. And I got my husband proposed, fiance at the time, and we picked up and we moved to Georgia, and I never finished my degree. And that is literally my story. I kept on working, and I was getting great positions. I actually got an amazing, well, a few jobs, but my last position before I had my son was in purchasing at a big, company corporation. And I was making really good money, and I got pregnant, and we had decided that I was going to be a stay-at-home mom, and I wouldn't have had it any other way. And I figured out, I will finish these 2 courses. It's like, I will do it. I'll do it. I'll finish it. And it just never happened. Life just kind of took a hold. My son was a priority. And, one thing just led to the other. And I don't have any kind of degree for me to say, well, this is the job. These are the jobs that I had. The only thing I could tell you is I did take business as a major and psychology as a minor. And the only psychology I've ever done is with my friends and helping them and, through certain troubles. But business, Catherine Gibbs was probably the best thing I could have done because it really helped me become a secretary, and then eventually executive secretary. And then eventually I got into the purchasing position, and who knows where I would have gone from there. It was only, up and away after that. But then I had my son, and I had found out that the company I worked for they busted, and people that worked there, they also were overseas. Everybody came to work. And this was in Glen Cove, and the doors were locked, and they literally shut down the company without telling anyone, without any kind of, severance packages. Everyone was just left on the streets. And this was maybe, I'd say, 6 months after I had my son. So I felt as though everything happens for a reason, and I didn't go back because of my son, and I missed it terribly. But then all of these thousands of people were out of a job. Isn't that crazy? So
yeah,
there were definitely times where I really wanted to continue. And it was only, 2 more courses, which I probably would have gotten life credit for, and that would have been the end of that. But I never did. I never felt the need to go back and do it again. I felt fulfilled enough. And I had done so many other things in the interim, like you being a mom, which is like, I don't know, 100 different jobs that you don't get paid for.
Right.
Right. Just don't get paid for it. You lose.
Right. You just don't get paid for any of
you
that.
lose
It's
sleep.
the most work you'll ever
The
do.
most work. And yeah, I would say very fulfilling as well. But I did think about it when my son was in college, because it just kind of like brought back all those feels. And I just was like, no big deal. Like, what am I going to do? Just be able to brag that I finally got my degree. Like, in my head, I kind of did get it, but it's like, oh, you're so close, you're so close. You've got 2 courses left. And, how could anybody it's like dangling in front of you, like, how could you just not finish.
I mean, but sometimes things get in the way.
They did. They got in the way, but then I just didn't feel it anymore. I had already, been a mother and raised my child and already had jobs and made pretty decent money. And now I'm at a place in my life where I'm just really happy with what I'm doing. And it would really just be for me to just finish it for no other reason. So that's it with me, but I'm extremely interested in discussing you because you have had some life. So let's talk about you and what you first started to do when you were younger and interested in and where that led you.
So I really wanted to join the Marine Corps when I was in high school. And I was going through all of that, but then I got some scholarships to college. And so I decided to give that a try, to go to college first. And then I thought, well, I'll just go in later and I'll be an officer and it'll be fine. And so I went to college and I started getting a degree in law and criminology because I always thought I would go to law school or I would work in like the field of forensics somehow. And then I went through it and some people told me that I should work for attorneys before I finished my degree and went to law school. And so I did. And I realized that it's not like it is on TV. And I'm not just going to be, doing arguments in front of a judge all day and, all the exciting parts. I learned that there's just a lot of paperwork and that you hardly ever even go to trial. And so then I was like, well, that's not any fun. That's not what I want to do. And so I wanted to work in the intelligence community. And so I got a job at a company that did that sort of thing. They did legal and intelligence work, a private company, and they actually paid for my master's in intelligence studies.
Oh, wow.
So that's how I ended up getting that because they paid for it,
Sure.
And why not,
Exactly.
I mean, and then when I kept working in those kind of fields and the legal field or, fields of intelligence and analyzing all of this stuff. And it just wasn't, I felt like it was sucking my soul out. Like some of the things that are just done, like backroom deals. And it didn't sit right with me, like a lot of the things that happen in those fields. And so I was like, I just want to do something else. I want to do something that helps people. I want to do something that's stopping, that's making a difference in the world instead of like something happens and then we make a deal so that so-and-so doesn't get in trouble and somebody else does. And
right.
Like in the legal field, that happens all the time. If you can afford the really good attorney, you're going to get in less trouble.
Right.
And so it always was kind of like, and I was like, I just don't like this. And so I worked in corporate law for a little while when I first moved to Oklahoma. And this was like the end of the end when I just couldn't do it anymore.
That sounds awful. Corporate law.
I had a headache every day I get migraines anyway, but that job was so just awful that I had a headache every day for like 2 years that I worked there.
Oh no.
And so, I worked there for 2 years. And of course it was like a boys club in there. There was the only women that worked there were assistants or secretaries.
Yeah.
There was one female attorney and she was not a partner. She was a junior partner and she'd been there for 20 years and still wasn't getting anywhere. And so she actually got offered to move up and be a federal judge. And when she told me she was leaving, I was like, well, I'm leaving too, because you're the only person here that makes this job bearable. They really were like when you think of like fraternity guys, they were just the older version of them,
so obnoxious.
Like very, very much like, obnoxious, misogynistic,
oh god,
talking down to their assistants, and these are all women who a lot of them have degrees. A lot of them have been working in the legal field for a long time. They're very knowledgeable. And the way they would talk to them, I was like,
disgusting.
Yeah, it was really disgusting. And so I volunteered for a little while at the Juvenile Justice Center. And I thought, wouldn't it be great if we could help kids before they end up in the system? And so I thought, I'm going to go become a teacher. And at the time, well, even now, probably still, I don't know. They need teachers so badly
Yep.
that you can get so many grants that your school ends up being almost free if you're going to be a teacher. It was basically, I had to hardly pay for anything.
Oh, wow.
And so,
That's great.
yeah, so I got that degree, almost free. And then, I liked teaching. I like the kids and I like the teaching part. It's the political part that gets to me. Like,
Can I ask you a quick question?
Yeah.
What state were you living in when you were going for your degree?
For teaching?
Yeah.
Oklahoma.
Okay. In Florida, you do not need to get any kind of teaching degree like early childhood education, or you don't have to. Here, and this is what's ridiculous, no matter what degree you have, even if it's in oil painting, all you have to do is get certified, and you
It's the
take a
same in
test.
Oklahoma.
Yeah.
You just have to take the test.
They're so desperate.
However, I didn't feel like I had degrees, I had law and criminology and intelligence studies, but I didn't see how those could transfer to any school subject.
Well, yeah.
And I didn't feel confident like going in and teaching. I have a biology minor for my first degree. And so I looked at that option of taking the test and becoming a biology teacher.
Oh.
Well, I started looking at the test and I was like, my little 6 classes to get my biology minor, I can't pass this test. I can't teach these kids biology. I was like, they will all fail. And they will not know what they need to know. So that's why I went back and got the degree, because I didn't feel comfortable being a teacher and being that, like, having that responsibility without having gone through and like really learned my subject. And so I got an English education degree, and I like reading and I like books. So, it was fun. And then I got a master's while I was still teaching in literature, because my plan was to become a college professor. And when we moved to Arizona, that was still my plan. I finished that master's after we moved to Arizona. I had finished my thesis, the giant paper, and that took me a year. And I think that just like took everything out of me, writing that giant, 200-page paper.
Oh, it's crazy.
And then defending it. Yeah, it was. So I took some time off from school, and then I've never gone back to get the PhD to be a college professor. And now, I have a couple businesses, and I just think I get to make my own hours.
Yep.
And, like yesterday I did all of the orders that I had for clothesline. We got all of the orders out, so they all went out this morning.
Yeah.
And then like today, it's like I don't really have anything that I have to do for any, I've already done it all. I did it all yesterday. And then so today I was like, well, I'm going to record the podcast with Julie and then, do whatever I want in the afternoon. Like,
I've got to tell you, that's one of the things that I actually really like about what I'm doing now. Where my husband and I, we're in our 50s. We're in a position now where I don't have to work, but I want to. I'm not just, I don't care how much money.
Right.
And I think we might have touched the subject before, that I am not a good stay-at-home person. And even if I'm not, if I'm busy, but I can find things to do, I'm okay. I'm better.
Yes.
And it's, this last year of the lockdown and everything we discussed has really changed a lot of people, but I'm really content right now. And I cannot ever see me working for someone ever again, because I'm my own boss now, and I still have to deal with people, which is not always easy, but it's a lot better than what it was. And I can't see me ever answering to someone again, having to clock in at a certain time. Yeah, when I'm taking care of fur babies, I still have to,
Right, you have to have a schedule, but I feel like that's different, because of course we're still confined to a schedule with all of our animals. We can't, like, there's no like sleeping in, like one of us at a time could sleep in, because the other one has to get up and feed the animals.
Right.
Which is fine, but it's that I don't have to leave my house to do that. I go outside, I feed them, and then I can come right back in and sit with my coffee and like read a book or scroll social media and not be worried that somebody's going to get mad at me.
Well, and that's just it. I think that, look, I am sure that there's a lot of people that feel the way we do, that
I'm
might,
sure.
they might, like, for example, my husband works for, a very big corporation. And does he have a boss? He does. But my husband has been with the same company for 28 years. He's got a reputation. His boss is amazing, but he's somehow been aligned with bosses that just are so hands off with him because he's really good at what he does, and they know he doesn't have to be monitored. He's just he's good. He knows what he's doing,
Right.
and his clients love him and they rant and rave about him. So although he does have a superior, it's kind of like they're friends, and there's nothing really bossy about him. And my husband's in sales and he doesn't have to clock in at any time. But he is still working for the company. He is still working for his clients. And he still has to deal with the rhetoric and the bullshit, but it's so hands off, and he's his own boss, that he's got this an incredible personality where I know you and I are not like this. Things, just roll right off of him and they just drop on the ground and it's no big deal. Whereas with me,
Oh,
I'd be like,
yes.
right?
Yes. Yeah. If you're, and Mark is that kind of person as well, where, he just whatever. And, someone can like criticize him and he just says, okay. And then he just never thinks about it again if he doesn't feel
Ugh,
like that they should have been, like when people they shouldn't be criticizing you, but they feel like they
yeah,
can.
of
And
course.
so he just lets that roll off. Whereas me,
Yeah.
I'm like, well, I can't believe that
Yep.
they had the nerve,
We're women.
and it like,
We're women.
and it ruffles me for like the whole day.
If not the
I
next
hate to
day.
say
I
it,
know
but
I'm
yeah,
like that too. But I've said before that there have been things in the past that would bother me, and I would just be so distraught over it and obsessive, and you not being able to let it go. And then like the next day I'd be like, but blah, blah, blah. But now I very rarely get affected. I could let myself like go there, but I don't now. I'm just more calm, and I don't actually. I did my Monday mission about tolerance, which is really funny, about learning to be a little more tolerant. And without realizing it, over the last year, many of us have learned to become more tolerant, even if we still want to have a mini tantrum. We've all kind of
yes,
learned that. And so I I loved the job that I had before it at the high school I was working at. Loved, 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 loved it. Um, and I absolutely adored the kids. We just had such a great relationship, and it was just a beautiful thing. And I looked forward to being at work every day, with the exception of having to get up as early as I did, because high schools you're there early.
yes,
And even though some of the parents were not always easy, it wasn't them that I had to leave. It was like you were saying before, the politics and the
yes,
bullshit behind the scenes that became just too much. It was worse than corporate. So that was it had just been so many years of working, and that my husband was like, all right, maybe it's time that you pull out and you start your dog business. And it was so funny when he said that. Funny because I probably would have stayed and bitched and complained, or maybe left and gotten another job, had he not said that. Like, he kind of gave me the green light, like,
it was the same thing for Mark when I got fired at the beginning of COVID, and I was like, well, I'll just I'll file for unemployment and then I'll just find another job. Like,
mm,
and then he was like, why don't you just like do your businesses that you've been
you
wanting to do?
see,
And it was like, I would have never just done that.
me either. Our men, we've got good men, and they lift us up. And I think that they understand us very well, to the point where we wouldn't, like, we would have had that in the back of our head. But
Right. That we
sometimes,
want to do that. But
exactly. And had it not been for my husband pushing me into doing it, it probably would have just remained a thought or a dream. And honestly, it was, I think it was all timing for me. Because the other woman that had been doing it for years recently retired. She and I live in the same community. We've known each other for years. We became much more friendly once I started doing the dog walking, not the training part, just the walking. And we became, we befriended each other, and she gave many people my information, because she was starting to go back and forth to another home in a different state. And then she told me recently she was retiring. So I just feel as though all these, years of doing it, these last few years have led to this. Like, I feel like, all right, I'm going to have more clients than probably ever before. Once people are kind of more vaccinated and whatever, but I don't think that I would have been able to even fathom the idea of doing it had it not been for my husband telling me, go ahead and start doing this. And it was just so cool. And it honestly so strange for the first time in my life, not working. There was one time when I hadn't worked aside from being a stay-at-home mom the first 5 years. And then I'm sorry, I would say the first 6 years, and then I started working again. There was a period of time during the recession about 10 years ago where the company I was working for went belly up. And it was a really fun company to work for, a small business, but they just couldn't withstand the recession. But the cool thing for me was I was not only, well, I'm not going to say how I was getting paid, but you can imagine, under the table. But what was really cool was I was still able to drop my son off at work and pick him up after work. I was working 5 days a week from like 10 to 2. My son was in middle school, so he never even knew I was working half the time because
right, which is so nice because you can still be there for everything.
Yeah, and it was wonderful. And he was really flexible and cool. And because of the flexibility of my husband's job, let's say my son was sick, there would be some days where my husband would be able to work from home and I could still go to work. So it worked out really well, but the whole notion of working and being my own boss working is a lot more fulfilling, I think, than any other job I've had, with the exception of working it with the kids at the schools. But, and I do miss that, but being with animals is just, I don't know. They're just a whole different, well, I know they're a whole different species, but just the business itself, it's so much more fun. And I mean, I could stay physically active, but I also wonder how many other people there are out there who are working in an area that they didn't, go to school for.
I bet there's a lot.
There's got to be. I know that there's a lot of kids that are changing, their major. Like my son did that, and I kept saying to him, if you're going to change your major, you have to make sure that because you can wind up taking like 2 semesters worth of courses and then you change your
and they don't count.
And they don't count. He knew that he always wanted to go into business. So when he changed his degree, his major, he still stayed within the realm of business.
Okay.
But it was just an entirely different like name for his major. But luckily for him, everything kind of transferred over. But
that is good. Yeah. Because you don't want to waste all of that time.
Oh my God. He would have stopped. He would have been like, I'm done. Because it was a struggle for him to just get through college. Because I think he has a little bit of me in him where he was just like, I'm done after high school. And I'm like, no, you're not. If you can come up with something that you can do, like get certified in something, like a trade or whatever, then okay.
Yes.
But until then, no.
I think there's a lot of people too that are maybe a little older. Like I want to say like the younger generation doesn't have as many, because when I was in school, it was like understood, like that's what you did next was you went to college.
Right.
And there was no like anything else. And then when I was teaching, there was like a shift, where we would encourage kids to go to trade school, like not everyone's cut out for college, but I think a lot of people just kind of got funneled right into college because
that's what I was saying earlier.
Yeah.
The thing to do. And
I think
that is what my parents had seen. Both my parents did not go to college. And it doesn't mean that they wanted me to go to college, because they never really said that. But I just think that the fact of me going away or having a year of no college, maybe they thought I would not want to go back. Kind of like you, how you didn't finish your master's, but you were older then. For me, I like I said, I went to a local college for a year, and then right across the street from the campus was Catherine Gibbs. And my mom kept saying, you should go to Catherine Gibbs. You go to Catherine Gibbs. I'm not going there. I'm not going there. And I was like, oh, screw this. One day after my day was done, I went across campus to Catherine Gibbs, and I was like, let me just see what this place is like. And I actually fell in love with the place. I fell in love with, the fact that I can actually get a degree and it would go towards all of the college credits. What I would learn, placement. They actually had, placement jobs. And at that time, it was extremely popular. I mean, if you wanted to be like a secretary, executive secretary, assistant, and you had Catherine Gibbs on your resume, you were hired before any other resumes were reviewed. It was like a big deal back then. It was very prestigious, the name. And I knew that. And I was like, all right. So my parents paid for that, and it was not cheap. I remember it was almost like the cost of a private college for 2 years, but they paid for it. And I loved every minute of it. I really did. I loved every minute of it. But, years and years and years ago, like back in the 60s when Catherine Gibbs started, you had to wear, it was just a school for women, and you had to wear certain dresses. You had to wear gloves. You had to act a certain way, sit a certain way, blah, 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 blah. And it was very different when I went. I mean, I didn't have to wear gloves. Can you imagine? Oh my God, a tomboy wearing gloves. I remember I had to dress the part like I was going to work. So I had to wear like semi-decent clothes versus like a college. But that was the only thing I remember I had to do. Like they were kind of like training us on how to
go into the workforce.
Oh yeah, and this is funny. I remember learning from one particular teacher who was really cool, and she said, she drilled it into our brains. Never, ever get your boss a cup of coffee, whether it's a man or a woman. And if you start a job and this man asks you to get him coffee or tells you to get him coffee, she said, run, get out.
What? That corporate law firm that I was talking about, every single one of them would send their assistants to go pick up their lunch, their dry cleaning, get them coffee. God. Yeah. And I always just thought, like, I have 2 degrees at this point, and I am fetching this man's coffee for him. Like, I mean,
it's degrading, and it's a power trip.
It's like, I'm your assistant to help, like, with legal documents and phone calls and taking notes in conference rooms and things. I'm not supposed to be fetching your lunch.
Agreed. And would he ask another man? No. And I'll tell you, I think it was maybe my second job after graduating. And or was it my first job? Rhonda, I can't remember. First or second job. And it was away from where I lived. It was a good, let's say half an hour. And I interviewed, I got the job. And I remember I got there and I sat down, and I hadn't met my boss yet. It was some girl who interviewed me, gave me the job. And she gave me this document. It was like a novel. And she had told me that I have to retype it or something like that. But I couldn't even read it. Like it was like a doctor's handwriting. Yes. It was really bad. And I I said, I'm sorry, but I can't do this. She's like, why not? I said, I can't read it. Like, I doesn't make sense to me. Didn't you go to Catherine Gibbs? I'm like, yeah. I'm like, but this is like Latin, you know?
Right.
I mean, it wasn't Latin, but it was like he wrote in such chicken scratch and teeny, teeny little letters. Anyway, she and I were in the middle of talking, and the guy I was going to be working for comes over and introduces himself and asks me to come into his office. Prior to coming into his office, he then turns around and he says, oh, and, you know, get me a cup of coffee on your way. Like, just like that. Matter of fact, like, get me a cup of coffee. Not if you're getting yourself some coffee, get some for me, or just, this is demanding it. And it was
Right.
at that, right. And so at that moment, boom, flashback. Don't get coffee, run. And I'm like, oh my God, between not being able to read what the hell is on this document and now him asking me for coffee. So I went into his office and he asked for his coffee, and I said, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I forgot. I'll get it for you after." And he's like, "Well, why don't you go get it for me now, and then we can go over the document." I was like, "Okay, sure." I left the document on the chair. I picked up my things. I got in my car and I left. That was it. I didn't tell anyone anything. I just left. And I remember, like, just this feeling of, at first I was really upset because, you know, I interviewed, I took the time, I got the
Right.
job. But at the same time, I was equally upset because of thinking of the standard that certain men, you know, hold women in certain positions up. And like you were saying, those other women that you were working with, you know, they had a lot of experience and degrees. And whether I was a secretary or a paralegal,
Right.
it's because I'm a woman.
Right. And it was just like the fact that they only had one female attorney that they had hired into this firm,
Mm,
and like she had been stuck stagnant in this position for a long time. You know, like,
horrible.
and she said, I'm just never going to get any further here. I'm never going to be made into a full partner. This is it for me. Like, they're never going to let me in their little club. And I thought,
And
that is,
that's just right about the club part.
yeah,
It's very, did you ever see A Few Good Men
yes,
with okay, so he was, well, actually no, I'm sorry, Philadelphia with Tom Hanks.
did not see that one.
Rhonda, I don't care what you're doing the rest of the day. Philadelphia. Let me break it down for you. He's a gay man who contracted AIDS. And Philadelphia, the movie, was it came out during the heart of AIDS and the beginning, and when lots of people were dying, mostly gay
Gay
men,
men. Hmm.
and they labeled it as the gay disease and this
Right.
and that and all that other stupid shit. And Tom Hanks, his performance was beyond incredible. And I don't want to give away too much, but he was a lawyer in a law firm, a big law firm, and they would make vile jokes to him about gay men. They did not know he was gay. They didn't know he had AIDS either. That's all I'm going to tell you. And he was let go and decided to sue. Now I know it sounds like I'm telling you the whole movie, but I'm not. There's so much more about it. Needless to say, there's this one part where a woman in the law firm got a black woman got promoted. And one of the men who was on trial from the law firm had made a comment about her earrings. And I'm not going to tell you anymore. You'll see it because it was a really good response that she gave. But the reason why I'm bringing this up is because we're talking about a woman. We're talking about a black woman at the time, a minority, and I think basically just being a woman. And nowadays, in the 2020 age, lots of women of color are getting advancements because of their color, not so much because of their background. And they are, many of them are saying things like, I was only advanced because of my color. And they'll sue saying, well, you advanced me, but you're not paying me anymore. So
Oh, so it's like on paper, like
it's
an
on
to
paper.
make the company
Exactly.
look like they're
Good.
good
Right.
and diverse and promoting women and promoting people of color.
Correct.
So,
And not all color. I mean, some are color, some are just women, but
but it's
either way, they're both considered the minority.
right. And so it's not, they're not really trying to make the company better and more
No,
diverse. They're just, they don't want to, they want it from the outside, they want it to look good.
good. Yeah, exactly. But it's the reason why I brought that up is because what happened in this movie years ago and what happened in your firm and what's happening in today, it's still the same shit. It's okay, you might be advancing a woman, or you might be advancing a woman of color, or a man of color, or a man of a different ethnicity, but you're only doing it, like you said, to look good. You're not doing it to advance the person for your company, to help. You're not paying them what you should be paying them. And so it's almost like when you're working for big companies, they almost have to do it. They don't want to do it. And there's still that stigma. Just because you're a woman, or just because you're a man of color or a different ethnic background, what, somehow you're less than the American man? You can't do just as well? It's such a really disgusting thing. It's always bothered me.
Yeah.
Maybe because I'm a woman
Maybe.
and
And you
was
know,
asked to get coffee.
yeah, and we're asked to get coffee because
Yeah.
I've talked to Mark about that, and I've asked him, like, of course, most of his career's been in the Marine Corps, where no one would think to ask him to go get them a cup of coffee. But I asked him, I said, is that like, would women get asked, like, if there was a woman, like, say you guys are having a meeting or whatever, and there was a woman, would she get asked? And he said, not in the Marine Corps, because everybody's a Marine. And so it's
It's all equal.
yeah, it's very much like that. Like, they don't care about things like that. It's, he's like, unless that's their job, like, is that part of their job? Like, are they on food service? Because then, if it's your job, like you're doing food service, then you do bring food and drinks. And I was like, yeah, but that's different. That's your job. So I asked him, but like on other jobs you've had, like, he worked at a juvenile detention center and stuff. And he said, yeah, there would, if we had a meeting and all the employees are there, if the bosses are men, would tend to look at the female employees and ask them, would you mind bringing coffee home for everyone?
Well, that's different.
I don't know, but why the woman? Why can't they say, why specifically, if they're all equal, if you're all equal and you're having a meeting, why would you think to look at the woman in the group and ask her to go get the coffee?
You're right. No, you're right. Yep.
Like, and I was like, they should just pose the question, would anyone mind going out and bringing coffee in for all of us?
Well, exactly. Did you ever see Working Girl with Melanie Griffith?
Yes.
Okay. So when she got the position in that big company, in a big new office, the woman, her secretary, had said, I guess, like, now is a good time for you to tell me, like, your expectations. And she said, well, what I don't expect is for you to bring me coffee unless you're getting some coffee for yourself. Because this woman, Melanie Griffith, was already this secretary. She had just come off of being a secretary and getting, climbing up the corporate ladder. And that's how I feel. Like, I would never, because I'm a woman, say to anyone, even a man, get me some coffee, or be on some freaking power trip.
If you're grabbing it for yourself, like, would you mind grabbing me some since you're going in there? And I would ask that to anybody.
It's like it's like with Mark. Let's say you're getting up to get something to eat or something to drink.
Offer.
That's exactly the same with me. To me, there's absolutely nothing wrong with someone who is getting up to say, hey, I'm going to get some coffee. Would you like some? Or for your boss to say, oh, if you're getting some for yourself, but don't make the extra trip for me.
Right.
That's a good boss. And let me tell you, there are some women. I work with one woman. Well, aside from the people I worked with in the school district, I had one woman boss, and I remember I was working for a man who was incredible, and he got promoted, and they are now bringing in this woman. And I thought, oh God, because there are some women that are in power positions that abuse the power themselves. And
Yes.
this was one of them, trying to prove that they're just as
And
good as the man. And they,
it almost seems to be worse. It almost seems like
yes,
they get worse because they're trying to go one step further than the men, I guess. I don't know what it is, but I've had that
no, you're
experience where
right.
it's worse when it's a woman on kind of a power trip.
It's worse. And it was worse. And I remember she was this teeny little thing. I mean, I'm only 5'3", so she must have been 5'1", this teeny little thing. And she had this aura about her, this like, be scared, be very, very scared of me, kind of this like black cloud, like,
Yes. And
Linus's
he
blanket,
carries around all that dirt with him.
and it was
Yes.
all dirty. That's like how it was. I kept seeing like this cloud of darkness around her. And she proved to be a real POS. And it wasn't before long that I don't remember, she got laid off or what happened, but the way that she treated me was probably worse than how a man would have treated me. This constant expectation and this and that. And I remember her saying things to me like, Julie, if you want to make your way in this world, you've got to be tough. You've got to be this. And I kept thinking, yeah, I know what I need to do to get ahead, but one of those things is not to act like you are, because that's just a huge turnoff. I do remember, though, at one time, she said to me, do you know what the wave of the future is going to be? I'm telling you, mark my words. And she said, Windows, the computer that's going to one day have Windows software is going to be the wave of the future. And at that time, I don't remember what we were using, some kind of DOS system. And I was like, what the hell is Windows? And like maybe 2 years later, everything was converted to Windows. And we're talking forever ago when she told me this. And here we are, 2021, still using Windows. She was a woman ahead of her time, but she definitely, was struggling with her inner beast and trying to be like a man. But here's the thing, you don't have to be like a man
No, you
to get
don't.
ahead. You can just, there's plenty of the stigma is always going to be there. Women are always going to be second class citizens to men, but we've definitely made waves. But as far as, going to school and becoming something that, is kind of like the same. I had a friend many, many years ago, and she was just like a professional student. And every time she'd get a degree, she would stay in college, and then she would get another degree in something else, and another degree, and another. I mean, I can't begin to tell you how many degrees she had in how many different, areas, until finally she got her teaching degree and has been a history teacher for several years. But she didn't want to go into the real world. It's like she wanted to stay within the safety
Of the school. I
confines
think
of the
I
school.
know some people like that, and they have so many degrees. And I don't know if they're ever going to be finished or have a career because they just keep working on another degree. And I mean, advanced degrees too, like masters and PhDs. And I'm like, well,
I understand the premise behind it if you're going to do something with it.
right.
Like you got your master's and you became a teacher, but I know other people who, when they were younger, they knew exactly what they wanted to be. And we're talking like many years of education to be some kind of a doctor, whether it was a psychiatrist or a medical doctor, excuse me. And they knew from a young age what they wanted to do. The good thing about that for some people is, especially if you have to be educated for 8 to 10 years, after high school, if you know that that's something you want to do, then right after high school, bam, you can start. And then hopefully by the time you're in your 30s, like your mid 30s, you'll finally, be able to go off on your own. But the amount of student debt.
Oh, that's part of it. Like, I don't know that.
Paying that off for like the rest of your life, unless you start making really, really, really good money and, you can start paying it off and kind of be done. I remember someone I went to high school with posted something last week with like a something on her bank statement, or well, it was online, and she took a picture of it and blurred out some areas and for my student loan, and she's my age, 52. 52. That to me is incredible, to have student debt for that long of a period of time and be paying it off since your 20s, 30s maybe.
That is, I mean, if I hadn't gotten scholarships and grants and, you know, I would not have gotten as much education as I got.
Well, sure.
You know, like I couldn't have just paid for that out of pocket.
It's a lot of money.
And it is. So I did have to pay for some of my teaching degree out of pocket because they just didn't cover all of it. But for the most part, you know, I think it was like $1,200 that I ended up having to pay.
Oh my God, Rhonda.
So it wasn't,
holy shit.
Right. So it wasn't very much, but I can't imagine. I have, and a lot of my friends were fortunate enough that they could use like their GI Bill or something. But I do have a friend that she has 2 bachelor's and a master's degree, and I think she'll be paying off her student loans for forever.
That's like my sister. I mean, Marlo didn't go to college until I would say I forget how old she was, later in life. But she piled up quite a bit of student debt that still, it's just kind of sitting there, you know, and she doesn't believe that she'll ever be able to pay that off. We're talking like $100,000. Well,
wow.
yeah, I mean, she finished her degree and then she got her master's, and it's just kind of sitting there. You know, it's a federal loan, so especially with COVID, I think that they gave her a grace period. But I mean, she was paying the most minimal payments that still happen today, and so I don't think she'll ever be able to pay that off. I can't see it happening. And imagine how much more it is for those that went to college longer, and went to like maybe private universities or real eclectic, you know, like universities, maybe Harvard, Princeton, Yale, to get certain degrees, Temple University for maybe, you know, doctor degrees, medical degrees. It's crazy. But, you know, I'll tell you something. When my son was in college, he kept saying, well, what kind of a job can I get with this degree? I said, it doesn't matter. Just get the degree. There's a difference between getting a degree in, let's say, psychology and going for a job, you know, in business. They might not take you, but if you just get a degree in business, you can get whatever job you want.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, because it's such a broad degree, you know, like the business degrees are so broad. And, you know, my son he hasn't declared a major, but he's, you know, he hasn't gone every semester, and he's still in the beginning, you know, where he's still doing those basic general requirements. And so he hasn't had to declare yet. And he as well wants to do something in business, but he's like, I don't know if I should do like, there's so many like business management, business marketing, business administration. And he's like, I don't know which of those to pick. And I said, well, I can't really guide you on that because I don't know. I'm just going to read the same thing on their website that you can read yourself. So he does. And that's what I told him. I said, talk to the advisor. I said, because they'll be able to tell you like the subtle differences.
And that's just it. It's very subtle. And I just, in a comparative story, just want to tell you that my son, I had said he was just taking a regular, you know, doing a regular business degree. However, this particular business degree encompassed quite a lot of math. Not his forte, A, and B, he was completely disinterested in going to college because it was all math. He's like, I'm not going to college to take something I don't like. And yes,
and that's the same thing with Jacob. He's like, one of these degrees I have to have calculus for. He's like, I do not want to take calculus. He said, remember, I didn't want to take it in high school, and so I took a different math. He said, so I don't want to take it now.
I agree. And the same thing happened with Jake. And Jacob, my Jake, your Jacob. But oddly enough, he went and spoke with his advisor. But, you know, with college, there's advisors in different areas. Like you could see your advisor for this particular degree, but then if you want to, you know, go into, I keep bringing up psychology, but let's say you want to switch to psychology. Well, then you have to go to the advisor that deals with this, they don't all know exactly what each, I guess, area or major does. So when he was talking with his advisor for his business degree, he said, hey, look, I can't keep doing this. It's just way too much math. He said, there is another degree that is very similar to this one, and it has probably the things that you're looking for: less math, more entrepreneurial type courses and business courses. So, but he said,
Right.
but that's all I know. If you're interested, make an appointment with so-and-so who is in that department. So he went ahead, made an appointment, sat down and spoke with the guy. And he goes, it looks like you would probably just need to take one more math class instead of 4 more math classes. And then pick your minor if you want to pick a minor. And so Jake was like, okay, cool. So he wound up having to take the second statistics class. So you got statistics 1, statistics 2. Oy vey, let me tell you something. The trouble that he had in statistics, and he even went to this like tutoring thing at the library, and he got like a one-on-one tutor, and it was just enough to get him through the class. I think, excuse me, it was the only class he did really poorly on. I think he got like a C in the class, and it lowered his GPA, but he was like, I don't care. Like, I'm not in this to be on the dean's list. But he was doing great in all the other classes. And I was more upset that, his GPA was brought down. But this was like, I would say, after his first year. So he still had time to bring it up. And he did. But it's not like high school. But he was so much happier when he switched his major. And again, he always had trouble describing what this major is. It's called public administration and something else. And people would say, what the hell's that? And Jake would go, I don't know. I don't know.
I don't know.
It's just, business.
It's just, yeah. I mean, and I think there's a lot of degrees that are like that as well, where people get them
What
and
is
then other what is it? I don't know. I know a lot of people got a communication degree, and I'm
what
like,
is that?
What is it? And they're like, what is a communication degree? And they're like, well, we just learned about like communication and stuff.
But it's so true. The only way that he could describe it, which his advisor said to him, which was funny because even his advisor said, I know it's really difficult, that you can actually get a job in the private sector. I'm sorry, I'm so wrong. The public sector, like government or even local positions, like, where we live or whatever town you're in, you can get a job there. But he also, but it's also entrepreneurial, which taught him a lot about starting his own business. And he took a minor in criminal justice. So if he ever wants to, join the criminal justice sector, he can. So
okay.
Yeah.
So that's a really good, like, versatile.
It is. But I'll tell you the funny thing, Rhonda, is that he didn't deliberately get a minor in criminal justice. He just wound up there were certain electives that he was only interested in, and he always kept going into the criminal justice area and taking these electives. And as it turned out, his advisor said, I think it was his last semester, no, second to last semester. And he said, you're just like 2 or 3 classes shy of a minor in criminal justice. So why don't you keep doing that? And Jake was like, oh, that's actually really cool because I do like criminal justice, but he didn't do it on purpose. He just wound up liking
with the elective.
Yeah.
So when Mark was going, University of Arizona requires that you get a minor, and it has to be in a different area than what your area is in. And so Mark just happened to get a sociology minor because of the same thing, like what he was interested in. And they were like, well, you're really close to a sociology minor if you just take a couple more classes and then that will count. And he was like, great,
exactly.
Let's do it.
You see,
but it was totally by accident.
And it's just funny because I guess I could have thought of it, or he could have thought of it without realizing that he has a minor. But I wasn't thinking about that. I just remember prior to him picking out his courses, he was like, hey, Mom, what do you think about this one? Or what do you think about that? And I'm like, it doesn't matter what I think. But sometimes he would read the description and he's like, what the hell does this even mean? Mom, can you? And I would look and I would go, yeah, I have no idea. What the hell kind of a description is this? And then we would both go online together. And there's like this website you can go on and you can put in the course number. And then there's an explanation from various different people with what you learn, which was really cool.
Yeah.
So he was able to kind of figure it out with that. But I think in the end, it turned out to probably, it was definitely a better fit because he probably would have quit had he needed to take a more than one more math class because it was hard enough getting him through it. And there were times when he's like, I just want to take a semester off. And I sounded like my mom. I'm like, listen, I never threatened him that we wouldn't pay, but I just kept saying, unless, you have something else, because if you take off one semester, forget it. You're never going to go back. But he did. I felt like he needed a break anyway. So he took off a semester. And then when it was time for him to start looking at classes, I'm like, hello? He's like, nah, 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 nah. I'm like, no. And then he picked out his classes. But to this day, he's in sales. He works at a car dealership and he's doing really well. But honestly, anyone without a degree could still do it, but he wants to dabble in that and start going into business with somebody else, a partnership where it could turn into a nice little business of I think that he said something about auctioning, like he would hire someone to do the auctions and then he has a friend who can actually fix the cars, but he's the back end. He would own the company, and then get a piece of the profit and then sell it to dealerships or, individual people that want the car. But he wanted to get the experience of how to kind of manage the whole thing through sales. And that's why he's at the dealership right now. So he's really getting a lot of experience on how to sell cars. And sometimes there are cars that are sold at auctions that are brought to the dealership. And he's learning all about that. And I thought that was a pretty smart thing to do because he really loves cars. I mean, loves cars. So we'll see what happens. He might stay within, the same thing of his degree, but if he doesn't, it's no big deal because we all don't stay within the realm of doing it,
No, we do not.
Oh, there goes your car. Okay, so tell everybody how they can touch base with you. Oh, that alarm is going off.
It is. I knew Mark was going to get it. I was just waiting for him. I knew this morning when we dropped off Aubrey and he locked it with the key fob. I knew it was going to do that at some point today. And I almost said something to him, but I was just let him learn on his own.
How did you know that the alarm was going to go off?
Because it always does. If you lock it with the key fob, it always goes off.
But isn't there like a 30s, like can't, Oh, you mean like he opened? I don't understand. He opened it.
When we got out of the truck and we were headed up to the house, he turned back and locked it with the key thing, and the alarm always goes off at some point in the day if you lock it with the key thing. And so I always just lock it at the door. I just push the button on the door, and he does it all the time, and I told him like 1,000 times, and he always says, I know.
And this time you decided I'm not going to say anything so he can learn from his mistake. Yes. So let's see. Next podcast, you're all going to hear the beep beep again.
Yeah, we'll see if he learned it.
So funny.
So anyway, people can find me at the Rhonda Marie on pretty much every social media platform.
Perfect. Okay, and same here. Nothing but Julie. You can find me anywhere, social media, and podcast streaming and all that other good stuff. And also feel free to check out my blog. And Rhonda's got a blog and a whole lot of other stuff going on. So just check out her social media and you'll find it there. All right, Rhonda. Great speaking with you.